Hi, Joe. Good morning. Good morning, Mr.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good, good. I am following up with Senthil, so when he has time, I'll come back and try to see what he needs.
Yeah, good.
Still seems to be busy, and of course, everyone is recovering from the break now.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, Demetrius.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It takes 2 weeks to get into the new year. So first 15 days, it's still happy.
As usual, we'll give people a couple of minutes to get connected up. All right, we're getting there. Just another minute. Share the agenda. All right. All right, so there's our agenda for today. We can change the order if we need to, but we'll definitely have Demetrius go first in case there's any additional discussion. There's Julia, perfect. And Mark's here, and then I'm, I guess, here. Only one we're missing that I expected was he just logged in. All right, so let's get started. So I don't have any announcements other than still Happy New Year, as Zencat said.
Morning.
The agenda is shared, on the screen. Any additions or subtractions for the agenda? And this is in roughly priority order. We should be able to get through all of these topics today. Is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about or queue up?
Joe,
Yes, sir.
yeah, sorry, just a quick question. Is there anywhere that we keep the moms of the meetings? Because I
Yeah,
was searching for that.
Yeah, they're on this this wiki. I'll post it.
Oh, okay.
I'll
Yeah,
post
okay.
it in the chat.
Okay, because I was searching for that and I couldn't find it. Okay.
Demetrius, they're also recorded on YouTube and posted there, all the meetings.
Yeah, and the links are in the the links used to be in the meeting invite. Have we stopped doing that, Paul?
The links to the YouTube.
Yeah, we're in the individual.
I
Like,
post it in the every time I post one, I put a link to it in the Slack channel. So in the Slack
in the
channel.
Slack channel, but we were putting them in the meeting notes themselves. For example, what I'm showing.
Yeah, I'm haven't done that in a while. So
Okay. We could go back and retrofit. But anyway, as Paul says, they're posted in the Slack channel, but the Slack channel is not a permanent record is the problem. And you can find them at the link, and then they're all there. All right. So we have all the people. We're ready to go. So Demetrius, do you want to share a screen, or are you just going to talk?
I just have one slide. It's nothing
Okay.
too big. Maybe I can share that one so people can have something to see while we're talking.
Yeah, please. All right, take it away. Set us up and do your
I
thing.
don't know. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so just wanted to talk about a quick topic regarding VPN Gateway CNI. Right now, we don't have this bureaucratic problem that we have discussed in the past. So I believe we can follow a proper approach on how to contribute that CNI to OPI, right? I have seen that you guys have created already one repo, right? Let me open that so people can actually see that. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see my GitHub page right now. I believe you cannot. No. Okay.
You shared by individual application.
Yeah. I will just paste that on the chat.
Okay.
So you have created this repo here, and I think that repo is fine. We can use that for pushing the EVPN Gateway CNI implementation. I have the intention to use the same folder structure as I have used to my old pull request in the OPI POC repo. The reason that I'm going to do that is because it is a typical structure that more or less all the CNIs that exist out there are using. So that, for instance, a service CNI or OVS CNI or other CNIs, and I'm also gonna use the same names on the folders that I have in the old PR. I hope that is fine. And also, I will go through the comments of that old PR in order to incorporate as many as I can to the new pull request that I will create in that new repo. And I just have some general question on what would be the acceptance criteria for a first pull request, so I can work towards that. So do we just want code that is there? Do we want also tests that come? Now we're talking only for the first pull request, right? Do we want also tests that will complement the code? Any CI jobs that needs to run automatically? Any Docker containers builds that we need to push somewhere in some Artifactory or something like that? What do you think? I'm talking about the first pull request right now.
So restate the restate the request, as a sort of a direct question, like pick A or B, or agree that we'll do it, way X. I was trying to tease out exactly what you're asking for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna push the first pull request to the VPN Gateway CNI with the code, right? And but the code currently doesn't have any unit tests or any general tests that other CNIs has out there, or any CI jobs that run automatically when somebody pushes code to that project. So I'm asking if for a first pull request, does OPI requires also tests to be there and CI jobs, or we can just merge the first pull request without any tests and CI jobs, and then that part of the code can actually come on a subsequent PRs?
I mean, my opinion is that progress is better than not, and for it to enter its final form, it should have those, but it can be staged, in my opinion. Does anybody disagree? I mean, Mark, that seems reasonable from a maintainer point of view as well, does it not?
Yeah, no, I don't have any issues with that. I would just make a note in the PR that the tests are being deferred to a later update.
Right.
That way we know, things like so there's automatic release things with a GitHub bot and things like that. We just know that we don't want to kick the GitHub bot off to do a release. We don't want to, there's certain things that don't want to be done. So we want to defer them.
Okay, so the first PR will be just code that is working and has been tested by myself internally, and yeah, and of course it will be a PR that will need to be reviewed, and I will try to incorporate as many comments as you guys want, but I'm planning to work towards that target. Just code, just PR with the code that is working. No test, no CI jobs, no anything else. Those things can actually come in subsequent PRs, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep. No,
that is fine.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So those are my points that I had. If you guys agree with that, then I think we can start doing some work there. What do you think?
No, that's good. I think that'll start making some progress, and then we can add the CI testing as we move forward.
All right. Good. Let's do that then. I don't have anything else from my side, Joe. So that's it for me.
All right. So let me double check. If anyone has any objection to deferring the completion, of the unit test and system test for checking code in and working with the checked in code, please say it now. Otherwise we'll consider that as completely okay with everyone. And even if you have a comment like it's okay, but here's what you worry about, or any comment at all, I want to make sure that we don't have anyone who's going to come back and say, well, you didn't ask, or any of that. And I'll take silence as, and again, if you just stay silent for another 8-10 seconds, then we'll consider that done, and we'll move to our next topic. Give me 1 second. Good. Okay. All right. Share. Oh, I don't. It's because I'm not. It's not my meeting. Okay, just go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll share. I'll share again, and we'll continue. Thank you, Demetrios.
Thank you. Do I still sharing?
Yeah. No, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you stop sharing. All right. So so that one's set. Life cycle and provision. So Julia, so we got an update from Lee Ballard while you were out, which is no problem. What I wanted to do though was just get the a verbal summary, or if you had a slide, but you don't have to have a slide, on what are the the top couple of things that you want to deliver on as the life cycle group. And I know we have our agreed to chair still out for obvious reasons that we don't have to go into. But so Julia, what
Okay, sure. So I think I'll start out by highlighting what I see as the problem space right now, or the state of the union, as it were, which is, and not this union of this meeting, but the actual ecosystem. The state of the ecosystem is better. It looks like the problem that we have right now is everyone has kind of taken their own approach to move to market as quickly as possible. And all of the vendors have kind of, how to put this kindly, they have not really thought about standardization. They have not really thought about some of the interactions. Some of those interactions have had to be solved in silos by vendors. Some of the various aspects that are really required to be able just to boot a machine reliably and handle various cases just don't exist, or are predicated upon a whole lot of stuff. And I think right now the thing the group can be focusing on and make some headway on is to actually try and drive standardization through use case discussion and try and highlight the problems that are perceived and how might they be solved. There's a trap that we can easily fall into, which is try to write code for these things immediately. And I think we've already fallen into that trap. Whereas we need to be talking about, like, okay, I have these different vendor cards. I need to be able to have these things work in a reliable fashion, and then drive that discussion between both hardware vendors and the actual vendors supplying the cards, or actually the hard vendors supplying the cards and the vendors supplying the actual chassis, and try and get them on the same page so that we can realistically have something that works consistently, reliably across vendors. Now, that is at the hardware OS interaction levels, where you're talking about powering the machine up, powering it down, what happens in this case, what happens in that case. All of those aspects have to be worked through, and they can only be really worked through, I guess, synchronously. So it's a very slow process, and we're also dealing with standards bodies and vendors when talking about what they're comfortable with in terms of firmware behavior, and each vendor's comfort level varies. So some of that is also delays discussions. So I think that's kind of where we're at, and the most value we can possibly deliver is going to be try to standardize some of those approaches and behaviors across vendors.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah. So, do you see issues in the interoperability, like a multi-vendor situation, or even with their own within the vendor? If you have like 4 cards of a single vendor, do you think that they have solved the issues? Because if there are problems by highlighting, definitely the deployment partners or their customers would move. There'll be some pressure from that side, and then it'll get fixed. And if we have a good way of solving as an alternative, and these two can get us to where we want to get to.
So I think that there are a varying number of cases, and we also have to pare down on what people want to support. A good example is we had someone wanting to do HA hot failover for the cards. And that's not really a provisioning lifecycle thing, but there are aspects you have to consider in terms of how do you notify the card, the base OS, that the card just went down, or the card's dying, or the card has to reboot. And those are sorts of things that we're diving deep into. And I'm not even sure the vendors themselves have necessarily solved the I want to have 4 of these cards in a machine unless they have an external power supply powering just those cards. There are vendors that do that, but they also limit to like 2 cards. So it's an evolving ecosystem is the way I'm kind of viewing it at this point. And I think until we have some standardization in terms of of the interaction with the hardware, it's going to be harder for us to achieve standardization of and the same expectation across vendors or in terms of interoperability and usage.
Okay, so for the DPU IPU vendors on here, do the statements Julie is making make sense? And do you guys want to have a common standard for how, you know, DPU IPU interacts with the hardware and OS from a, you know, a boot and initial bring up point of view, or not? Because it's always seemed to me that that's a critical first piece in having a DPU IPU ecosystem expand for everyone and be more usable. But so do you get, so for the DPU IPU vendors that are part of this, do you see that as well? I mean, from a, you know, from a server vendor point of view, you know, I definitely see that, you know, from you know, as Julia was stating.
Yes, we want this, definitely.
Okay. So is this a place where we need to write an actual, basically create a document as a standard here, you know, and again, it can refer out to other standards and say, use, you know, this part of this IEEE spec, this part of this PCIe spec, this part of this other spec, and, you know, you got to comply to the following 6 things. And that may not happen till the next generation, or maybe it can be fixed in firmware. But is this, so I've long thought this is a place where we actually need to have a standard. It's not a big standard, but still it needs to be a standard. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. The problem is that there is, until basically one of the challenges that we have is there's a lack of bidirectional baseboard communication in most server hardware because it's not a standardized behavior or function at this time. It's proposed. It's still under development. We will probably see in the next generation, but that's really what we need to be able to make this work. And in the meantime, there's a disagreement between major vendors of approach. And basically, it's one vendor is willing to have their baseboard management controller continuously pull, which is fine, because that's what they do. That's their design. And then you have another vendor that has basically expressed that they are extremely uncomfortable with a polling model. I'm guessing because they've been burned in the past, but they don't want to take a polling model approach. And I think it's reasonable if that's where they're coming from. It's just, we're not going to get immediate agreement until the next generation standard hits that we can build upon. So in the meantime, we're trying to drive additional data points that can exist so that we can have those record points there so that we can go, here's the flow process. You can poll or not, or poll temporarily, and hopefully have this data point, but that's up to the standards body right now. So that's kind of the approach we're taking and trying to navigate those cross-vendor desires. Go ahead.
Good question. Is it a requirement that this be a spec based on how the BMC controls the DPU IPU, or could we make it more generic for how you more like treating the DPU IPU like a network device as opposed to like a server peripheral?
So technically we could, although there's resistance to framing it using the PLDM network device values, because they are so extremely limited. I believe it's not ready and basically ready, whereas everyone seems to want a greater level of granularity to understand what's going on with the device.
Yeah, but that's still treating it like a server component. So if you came at it as like a switch or an appliance or some other piece of the network, then the semantics of that is really rich. You get a lot of information.
Not through PLDM. The challenge right now is you also can't initialize the bus devices because you start violating the PCIe standard.
Right. So I'm still coming at it from the is there space to define this outside of BMC, outside of PLDM, but then enumerate the new issues that occur because it is both a network device and a PCIe device.
I don't think it's being viewed that way. And I think the challenge right now is that the reality is we're talking about a computer system nested inside of another computer system. While yes, it is intended to be a network device or an offload device or a computational device that it helps assisting complex workloads, the reality is it still has an operating system. It still has some basic fundamental rules it has to behave by inside the chassis. And I think that's kind of the challenge that we've got right now, is also finding those common words and understanding. Once we finally frame, it's like, well, this is a system inside of a system. Oh, that changes how we have to think about this a little bit.
Yeah,
if it's just a network card and we're fully insulated through some sort of network fabric, that changes things dramatically, because we can just go, there's network fabric there. But it's not just a network fabric. We're talking about being able to present things like block devices through the cards. So that starts changing how, because you need the block device there to actually potentially boot.
Yeah, it's chicken and the egg. It's just that the term IPU the I is infrastructure. It's independent from the host. So that's why you may be renting the BMC to the tenants. So
Absolutely.
From our perspective, like giving information on giving the BMC capability to reset the infrastructure is a non-starter unless that's part of your SLA. So that's why that perspective of it is difficult. We think of it as a network device that can dynamically add and delete PCIe devices before and after enumeration. A long time ago, it was a silly idea, but that's why they decided to increment the alphabet there and call it an IPU versus something else. But that's ancient history now. So that's a key difference, at least enough for marketing to change the name. So that's why I bring it up. So that's why it's these baseline. It's not that we don't want to have that standard. It's that I think that I think it's important to acknowledge these core differences, and then see if or I want to challenge our assumptions on the things that we're saying are must-haves, or the standard must do these things. I think that we could get to I think we could get to a standard if we we're more open to just the most basic rudimentary functions of getting that card up and running, getting the operating system on that card up and running. We should look to how devices on the network that have their own operating system that are independent, how they operate to get there.
Yeah, so it's true we can stage it, or maybe it's actually two specifications. One is just how you deal with the card at these cards at the most basic level, and the other one is when you want to view it as an independent computational element embedded in another one. And these cards present, of course, PCI functions that look like, storage or network or, a cryptography function or so on, right? They present functions that don't make them look like they've got all these ARM cores and other things in there. And so you can treat them that way. Now, the point that they're also, from a provisioning point of view, and an overall end-to-end systems management point of view, this independent thing with its own OS does complicate things, but maybe we can separate those. I don't know. Julia and then Venkat.
So Dan, I have a quick question for you. Do you perceive an operating system needing drivers or not?
Which operating system?
The operating system on the host that has the card attached.
What we do with the host is we say we have no control over what's in the host, what the operating system is. We can't control that. So what we do, the interfaces that we present on the host are standard device models with their own drivers. So we put those into the PCI bus, and if the operating system has a driver for that device, then they can use it. If they don't have a driver, then they need to go and get it. So that's the abstraction that we use. All operating systems support PCI, and they can handle hot plugged devices, and so that's the lowest common denominator that we rely upon.
Yeah, so I think that the challenge is the hardware vendors don't want any sort of driver, and the server vendors don't want any sort of driver, and they just want the devices there long before you would normally hot plug. And I think that's part of the disconnect and the challenge here. So I think it'd be useful if you could join the lifecycle meetings and try and advocate that point of view, because I think that would help bring the discussion forward, hopefully.
Yeah, and so I have another proposal there, and then Venkat, I'll give you the floor. If you have a written document that you want to review and agree to, or here's the approach we're taking, here's what we're going to fill in all the details on, we can vote on it here and see if we have any detractors. And again, if you're a good OPI citizen, if we agree to that, that's the behavior that needs to get implemented. And again, if we have to start somewhere in getting genuine agreement across all the vendors. And this basic, how do the cards live inside the server one is important. I mean, I said that in the middle of last year, and then I didn't push too hard because it looks like progress was being made. But I think we need to go back from the TSC point of view and push. Venkat, go ahead, and then Julie, you can respond to both of us.
Yeah, so I'm again, I just have a proposal. I think parts of it are already mentioned. Maybe there are multiple stages here, right? I'm looking at other places like Dash and how it is getting solved. So maybe, and it's not new, right? There is a basic server, there is PCIe, and how that ecosystem at least brings up some basic functionality is known. So maybe there is a step one there. And beyond that, we are saying, hey, these device, I mean, like a power sucking alien, right? It just takes the power and then move on to something else where, it's just taking power, but it's independent. And maybe there is a tightly coupling that comes later, brings some advantages. High availability is even more advanced. So I don't see that necessarily as you cannot make it, how do I say, mandatory and they must have. I'm sure some of them will become optional. I think laying that out, saying, hey, this is the minimal we need so that we, it can, without issues or without ambiguities, DPUs/IPUs can come up, and beyond that, adding other functionalities, right? If we lay that out, maybe that'll kind of guide us on what is bare minimum, what is next, and things like that. So I see at least 3 stages there. So
I generally agree. I think with all statements, the challenge right now is I think we have a state where people don't necessarily agree, and they have legitimate reasons not to agree, and we need to either find a path to remodel the problem, or we need to go, these are cases we don't care about. And I think that's kind of the harder thing to navigate. And we historically, as long as I've been involved over the past year, there hasn't been the we don't care about part discussed, or we don't think this is a problem we need to be focusing on right now. The tendency is more, yes, we can solve it. And the reality is there are times where you can't solve everything.
Right. All right. So can you put together a proposal / scoping statement on what we, the high level of what needs to be closed on, and then we need to get all of the DPU vendors to agree, right? We have more people, we have startups and people who are not directly represented in the TSC that we need agreement from as well, but they are members of OPI. So I think what we need to do is have a proposal to say, here's what we're going to focus on. And you've got all the raw information. You just have to decide how to structure it to highlight what you've been saying. So break the problem into pieces, take a different point of view. And Dan, we need your input, because I think what you've been saying can be broken down into several constituent parts, and they can be solved independently, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But that's what we need to try, because otherwise, it'll be this time next year, and this will still be an open debate on what we should actually. And a year of work will have happened, and it'll be good thinking, but there won't be any conclusion, and there won't be any, all the vendors, you all agree you're going to go do part in this version, part in your next version of the parts that are coming out.
Absolutely. The problem that we've got is to do some of the things that hardware vendors expect or desire. When I say hardware vendors, I mean server manufacturers. When the hardware vendors the card vendors are basically saying, you're basically talking 2 to 3 generations of silicon at this point. So this is not a short, fast process. This is a long, drawn out process. So the question more needs to be, how do we accelerate this, and how do we reach a minimum viable level of interaction?
Yeah. And that is what we need agreement on the TSC. I can call people directly who often aren't on this call or are general members, or not general members, the non-voting members, and get them to show up to a call where we discuss and take a vote. But I think we need that direct proposal, because I know there've been several attempts to build outlines and do work in this area, and you're still doing them, and all that work is fantastic. I think we need something we vote on, and we have to say, look, if you want to kill OPI, then we just start ignoring stuff like this and we're done. And I mean done with OPI at all, because if we can't do this, then a lot of the other stuff probably doesn't matter very much. This is sort of the minimum baseline we need. And if you disagree with that, then please let me know. Santananda.
Yeah, so I want to say that I second Dan's opinion on the independence of the IPU DPU. There are 2 options. One is the host is trusted, where the DPU or IPU is subservient to the host BMC. Otherwise, the host is non-trusted, where it is subservient to the network BMC, right? Through the network, the BMC on the, or the AMC on the card is a part of the network, serves to the network rather than to the host. That's what there are two modes in which we see it.
I will say your view is shared amongst many. I think the reality for some vendors is drastically different, or it's anticipated that a management controller can just be a VM or a piece of a program running on the card. And I think that's therein lies a slippery slope, especially when you're talking about life cycling a device or provisioning a device. It makes it very difficult to move things forward in any way, which means the model has to basically drastically different. And I think the key to move things forward is to minimize scope and minimize the subservient, the card subservient or the host is subservient model to there is one way, and the other way can be considered later.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first principles problem is that these devices are capable of appearing like a closed NIC only, or a closed storage accelerator only, storage device only. And by closed, I mean, somebody installed software at a factory and it's like updating your BIOS to update them. I mean, it's some long involved process using a little tool you have to download and all that. That's certainly one way they can operate. And that has certain merits on how it operates. Then there's the opposite, and that's one end of the spectrum. The opposite end of the spectrum is it's compute inside compute, and you manage it completely separately. And while it's plugged into the server, it's independent of the server in all things except the PCI functions it presents, and the fact that it moves traffic on behalf of the server to which it's attached, or the device to which it's attached. And you have everything in between, including free DPUs sitting in the network, and I could outline probably maybe 8 or 10 viable sort of placement structures. And so on the one end, you have what Intel and Marvell are saying. On the other hand, we know that the DPUs, IPUs can be put in this mode that's sort of this closed mode where the life cycling is very different. And that's part of the problem we're running into, in my opinion, is that because there's an entire spectrum of use cases along the way, what do you have to then define all of them independently and say, look, when you're in this mode, and now write a spec. When you're in this mode, write a different spec. And maybe there's some baseline we could extract from that, but it's not trivial to do so. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone disagree with that sort of summary of why we're hitting this problem?
I mean, I think that's reasonable. I think we tried to do this last time with Boris, and then we sort of, I would say, unilaterally chose to go with the host is fully trusted model, and that's just not a mode that we I mean, we could support it, but it's a security hole. So that was, and then we kind of agreed to disagree at that point.
Truthfully, we're seeing the challenge we're seeing is an agree to disagree until there's a standard that we can build upon.
Yeah, the problem is who's going to define that standard. I mean, OPI is the place where that standard should be defined. And I mean, the trick then is to layer the standard or write a real, 3 different ones or something, one of which is absolutely you have to comply to this, or we're going to have to integrate into, servers. All the server companies are going to have to integrate 19 different times, right? However many.
Yeah. So the standards body we're looking towards right now to address one of the issues is the DMTF, and they're responsive. As I understand it, it's just I don't have access to see the issue in GitHub where they're discussing it right now. But it is apparently under discussion, and there's no real pushback on it. It just takes time. But I think the higher level challenge is reconciling what are the actual use cases and what are the use models, and is the server fully trusted or not? And I think the fundamental challenge is how everyone has decided to go to market is a little different, and their engineering approaches are different, and that drives how the cards are interacted with and how you put an OS on the card and how the device initializes. And I think that is the other difficult aspect to reconcile. And I think that we need to get to a same page of what is the minimum viable state and not try and boil the ocean. So in my mind, boiling the ocean would be, well, we need to support both security modes in all cases, and we need to support all of this. And the minimum viable thing is just one model of interaction, boot, and usage. So then we can go from there. Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking out loud here. The reason could be maybe we don't have, what we are thinking as choices, and each of us may be taking those choices, maybe sequenced. Maybe you go to a untrusted mode, from there to trusted mode. That's one way to think. The other is like, before there's a systematic way we could solve. I think, Joe was mentioning it earlier, right? That we could write down the functionality in increasing levels of functionality, like high availability comes later. What's the bare minimum we can? To exist in a server, you have to do something. You don't directly trust that. You can't assume trust. So that's could be security hole. First you start, untrusted, then you go to trusted. So I'm not the expert in the area, but I'm seeing that if we can write down some of these basic functionalities, maybe we can sequence them, and then that might solve these the choice that we don't have. It's a false choice we may be making, right? So again, I'm just thinking out loud that if we write it down, maybe we will have a little more clarity, and we will be able to make some calls here without, while waiting for the DMTF, and maybe that could even become input to them.
So I agree. I think the challenge is that we already have vendors who have taken stances that we may not be able to move. And I think that's one of the things we have to openly discuss, is the fact that this is the stance, and we have to also listen too. And that's a hard thing to do.
No, I think in general, we have done that well here, that we listen to each other. I think we can definitely have that open conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if you are saying that somebody went in a direction that they cannot backtrack, or the direction precludes us from doing certain things later, that's even bigger issue. So, but I think where some of us, right, if we have to give any input, we may have to put some baseline information in a common place and define the problem not in a simpler way, but in a concise way, and then that way we can tackle the real issue. So, Joe, you were saying something.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Julie, can you either share a document you already have, or start one that summarizes kind of where we are and what the decision points are? Doesn't have to provide the full answer, but I think we need some written information, or that's structured, that explains what the different separate. I'm struggling for a word.
I get what you're saying, and I we kind of already have started that. I think we started in the one area where we know we have a disagreement. We probably need to take. I probably need to take a step back, and probably get the entire group take a step back, and then have further discussion, and then summarize something out from that.
Okay.
But I think that's reasonable. I think it's a path forward.
Yeah, I suggest it's not just the area of where there could be agreement, disagreement. It's good to kind of describe the whole area and how would we do it that way. The bigger picture.
Well, I think that's the problem we've also run into already is we have focused on detailing all the ways we could possibly do something and not having full buy-in. And we're detailing ways and methods that don't really relate to the fundamental mission. So, or the state of devices that are out there. So I think that's kind of the other challenge is if we start enumerating on all the possibilities, then we're not focusing on any single one.
Yeah, we prioritize, we sequence, remove false choice. There's some standard problem solving techniques we could use. So I think, but at least for this group to help, I think we need something. And we could agree on what is the problem, and then from there we get to solutions. So for that, let's if you have anything that you could write down that gets that discussion started. Maybe restart it. I know you went through enough iterations and coming back, and what we are saying maybe something like, hey, let's start again. But I think
let's break. So let's take the first version of that next week if we can. It can be just an outline, and work with start working with that list and refining it, and then we'll shop it around for agreement. All right. We're almost out of time, so we're going to do, Mark, we're going to do your discussion next time. I think, because I think it's, again, a longer thing, or do you want to tease it out this time? So, start it, and then we'll continue it as the first agenda item next time.
Well, I think we can at least
put
out the query for, can we get a list of reviewers together that we feel can assist with contributions, reviewing the different PRs that are out there. If you look at, I'll share it real quick. If you look at the,
I'm gonna stop. All right, go ahead and share.
If you look at the repo that's out here, right, and you just take a look at what we're dealing with, right now we've got 153 pull requests. Some of these come from the automation functions, but some of them are just open pull requests. And they need reviews, and in some cases a little bit of triage when it talks about some of these bots that we have running for the CI/CD in order to resolve them and get them closed down. So, this is just one of the things that we're asking is, can we get a list of reviewers that we can start assigning, or people who can jump in and help get through all of this.
Right. So
at least I'll queue that part up, and we can talk about the other parts next week.
Yeah. So, Stephen, the notion of having reviewers who aren't full maintainers, and to get, it'll get people involved, and it's an interesting exercise if someone hasn't done, is good at software, but they haven't really done this kind of open source thing before. This is a good way to get introduced to it for the people in your companies. It's a necessary job. Most of these aren't hard to retire. The ones for big code drops and so on, we still have maintainers for that. And then we can use reviewer pool to grow our maintainer pool some. I think we need, I don't think 3 is enough. I think 5 would be more appropriate. So we want to, we really want to get a couple people in. We've had interest. At least one person has expressed a lot of interest. So we're, Mark's working with them to get them going to, get them approved according to our current process. And then the repo structure and the reviewing and the automation, there's a much longer discussion about it, but, the lifecycle and provisioning, had priority. So Mark will bring that in, the longer discussion in, and take response to this discussion next week. Make sense to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any final thoughts? Otherwise, we'll close the call at the time we really should, which is 5 minutes to, so everyone's not late for their next call in a cascading sequence of lateness. All right. Thank you, everyone. So, and so next time we'll do the GitHub and maintainer and reviewer discussion in some more detail, and we'll come back and start looking at the lifecycle and provisioning. If we have even a top level outline, breaking down the problems, Julia, that you just enumerated verbally. So you have a very good sense of how to break, how to list the problem. So let's start there, and let's agree that these are the breakpoints we have to solve somehow. And then, we can come back the following week and start to get agreement on which parts of the problem we're going to tackle and how, so that all the work that's been done over the last year and a half can be consolidated into, in the lifecycle and provisioning, can be consolidated into an actual standard that we can get everyone to agree to, or a first standard, right? Maybe we need a couple of separate ones to address the diversity of deployment options across the DPU and IPU space. But
I agree, absolutely agree. Sounds good. And maybe it's also, where are the vendors at? Like what class of IPU device do they have and on the market? And maybe that's another possible avenue that we could take, is to delineate the classes of device and try and help that break the problem down.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, excellent. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll close the call. See you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.